Hi everyone, welcome to our live stream. This is Samreen.
Nice, Carlos.
Today we're going to be interviewing Mike Hanson. He created Rhasspy, the open source voice project that I won't try to explain because we'll have Michael explain it better. We'll give a short bio to introduce him. So Michael Hanson is a computer scientist with the U.S. Air Force Research Lab. Whoa. He has a joint PhD in computer science and cognitive science and around 25 years of programming experience. Okay, well, that's really cool. Definitely goals. He's worked professionally as a software engineer, co-founded a now defunct Wyoming-based startup, and survived over 4 years of fatherhood. Also impressive. His interests include symbolic and statistical AI, common sense reasoning, and human-machine dialogue. Super cool stuff. Definitely to even ask what some of those are. But we'll turn it over to Mike Hanson himself. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
How are you?
Not too bad. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, it's all good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you and hear about, your, you want me to raise the volume? Okay, there we go.
That's all good.
Okay, cool. We're excited to hear about, your journey as a software developer engineer, and then also Rhasspy. This is all super exciting. Carlos definitely probably has a lot more technical questions because he's been in the weeds with Rhasspy. But yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of surreal seeing, you guys use the web UI and stuff with Rhasspy and talking about the spinning R and stuff. That was kind of just a funny thing I figured out I could do in the CSS, and it's improving in the next version.
Yeah, no, when I saw it, I was like, oh wow, this is completely put together. Because after coming off Snips, when that closed down, a lot of the community members were saying try Rhasspy. So we're like, oh okay, we'll give it a shot. And then it's a lot further along than I would have thought of finding something so soon.
Yeah, we were taken away by wow, there's something seemingly even easier to use than Snips, available so soon.
Well, so the so soon, it was actually, it's been almost 2 years, I think. I've been working on it.
Wow.
It originally started actually as kind of a side thing. I worked for a Raspberry Pi camp that the Air Force puts on. Mm-hmm. The research lab does a thing called a legacy camp, and they get some high school, middle school kids, and they do Raspberry Pi projects over the week. And so they asked me to teach, do a project. And at the time I looked at Jasper because I thought, maybe we could do a little voice assistant, but I didn't want something that would send off their voice somewhere else. I didn't want them to have to create an account anywhere because they're kids, right? And I didn't know what the legal things were with that.
Yeah.
And so I pulled down Jasper and tried it out, and I was like, this is close, but a lot of this stuff's kind of old, and there's maybe there's got to be some other easier way, famous last words. And so I started hacking on something myself, inspired by kind of the same paradigm, right? Of it brings together a bunch of existing open source projects.
Yeah.
Right. So Rhasspy's really, it's I gotta say, it's standing on the shoulders of giants, kind of thing. Especially things like the Sphinx and Caldi projects for the speech recognition. So it really needs a lot of other work that other people have done. I'm just putting it together and kind of getting it out there.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think taking not reinventing the wheel and yet coming out with something that is user friendly, is open source, is super valuable, and I think that's what the community really appreciates, that it's open source plus if something happens where say one element of it is deprecated or one element of it gets shut down to developers, you made it easy that you could add another swap it out kind of, so it won't die. Yeah.
And also the whole offline approach was nice because I noticed all the default configurations are for offline, even though you can switch out for some online components.
Yeah, we've had some people add in things like the Google text-to-speech. We just had a pull request for Google's speech-to-text, which I think is fine. Part of Rhasspy is about choice. If you want to make that choice, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But I think out of the gate, I want the default options to be, no account necessary and no online. And then, I'll probably put a little warning there that says, by the way, this is going to be sending your voice somewhere, but you can choose that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So, like from the start, like so you said you were going to teach a class, and that's how the idea like sort of came out, right?
Hmm.
Did you like decide to make it open source and try to have other people like contribute like from the start, or is that something you sort of wanted to do later?
I made it open source from the start, so the camp project was an outside my job kind of thing. Is kind of after hours, and um, I decided, I've been using like Linux and free software for about half my life at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So I thought, this is my chance to actually give something back if people
Yeah.
actually like this. They seem to really like Jasper, so I thought, maybe they'd like something that is a little more modern. Um, and so I decided on that and the MIT license because I know for a lot of places, if it's anything but that, you can't really bring it into your business or whatever. And I thought, whatever. If someone wants to use this, I'm not trying to make money off it. I already have a
Right.
job, you know.
Yeah.
And that's actually been one of the driving things is that there's no need to make money off it. And so I could just but I can still, what's great is I can still actually use it in my research at work, and so there's kind of a win-win, right?
Ah, nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool. So, like, I guess if you are comfortable, like, tell us a bit more about your background and like how you became a developer and like, just so people can know where Raspy's creator sort of came from.
Oh, I actually got my start doing programming way back in middle school. We had this weird thing in middle school where we did shop class, and then half the time we did logo. You remember the turtle you could program to draw on the screen? You guys may not
I
know
remember,
that.
I remember
I didn't
that. I did
have
that
that.
in Java.
Well, so it was back in its own little language on the old Apple
Ah,
computers. And that's where I got my start programming. And my teacher said I was really good at it, and he gave me a book on Pascal, the language, and kind of got my start there.
nice.
Then I ended up going to college for computer science and ended up working as a software engineer. It's kind of tongue in cheek. I had a brief startup in Wyoming, which is where I'm from. That's now defunct. It was a couple of years. We did some programming for the area.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked as a research programmer through grad school and got my job as a researcher here. Um, so yeah, I've been a lot of different languages, a lot of different environments, and a good amount of Linux stuff.
Right. Carlos loves Linux.
Oh, yeah, we use it as our personal drivers.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I for the longest time I did C# Windows stuff way back when,
Mm.
and then eventually made the switch, and it never looked back.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I'd say the only times I think of Windows is when like there's some proprietary software that's only available for Windows, like CADing or I don't know.
Or
Certain
games,
things like
right?
Yeah, games.
games. True, that's a big one.
Out of curiosity, what distro do you use?
Right now I'm using Linux Mint.
Oh, nice. I like the Cinnamon desktop.
Yeah, that's what I've been using. It's maybe I'm just getting old and cranky, but I'm like I don't need all these fancy side menus and whatnot. Just I'll just take the
It's a solid
take the
choice
UI.
still.
But I spent a lot of my time in actually in Spacemacs. That's where my main UI for my computer. So that's Emacs with Vim key bindings, so I can be extra cool, right?
Right. We have somebody on the community who is all for logos for the win, and then
All right.
also, oh my god, Mike is my twin, which he said when you said Linux Mint with Cinnamon Desktop, I think. Which is funny.
Or with the logo.
Uh,
There was actually there's a high school teacher in Portugal, I think, who emailed me about Raspy and said they were doing, just to bring it all around, they were doing the turtle graphics but with robots and they wanted to add voice commands, so they're using Raspy to have these little robotic turtles walk around and draw on pieces of paper on the floor.
oh, that's awesome. That's
So
so
I thought that was
funny.
kind of neat.
Yeah, that like I never understood the turtle concept. I didn't know there was an actual language because I remember intro Java. they like did it, but I was like, this is such a random exercise. Like, why are we making turtles draw lines? Like,
Yeah, that's a shame because it's a perfect way to teach geometry and actually get in a little bit to algebra
right.
in a visual way. And like my shop teacher had no idea. He's just like he had a book, but I still loved it.
That's funny.
So, just out of curiosity, from when Rhasspy first started to where it is now, like right before the 2.5 update, how much has it changed? Because I noticed like the documentation looks super professional.
Oh well, thank you. That's me doing my technical writing part. Usually that would go towards publishing papers. I ended up writing documentation instead. So it's changed massively. I would say so. It used to be basically a custom component for Home Assistant. So it was just something you could only run on a regular x86 64 desktop, as if you copy these Python files into your Home Assistant components directory. And I remember I thought this was cool. It worked out. It was actually a disaster with the kids, but that's another story. It turns out if you put 20 kids in a room with microphones and tell them to talk to a voice assistant, it doesn't work. Should have thought of that one. So I went and posted this to the Home Assistant forums, actually in the same thread. You can go see the thread's like eternal. And like the very first follow-up post was, can this work with Hass.io? And then later, can it be non-English? Like those were the two right out of the gate. And I was like, well, maybe. And that's kind of what's led to where we're at now. So Dockerizing it was the big step to getting it working in Hass.io. And then I was like, well, there's all these free speech models for Sphinx, which is what it used at the time only. So I just kept throwing them in there and was like, yeah, I took a French class in high school. I bet you I could write up, with some Google Translate, I could make some sentences up for an example. And now we got a lot of language support.
Wow.
Most of it's tested probably, but there's some of the languages like Mandarin. I have no idea, but I put it in there because there's a model available, and if somebody comes to me, hopefully they'll say, no, this doesn't work, and I can fix it.
Right.
Yeah, those things you definitely need outside help for, because learning a whole new language.
And I've been working to try and add the Julius speech system in because it's got good Japanese support and Polish. I don't know why.
Nice.
But you kind of need a breadth of systems to access all these different languages.
Right. Wow. So, yeah, because I remember the first time I heard of Rhasspy was because when working with Snips, one of our community members was like, oh, like, I use Rhasspy with the MQTT for Dutch. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's when I first heard of it, because I didn't know, like, there were so many languages, like, supported by Rhasspy. Yeah,
and really the support's coming from these people who have released these free acoustic models, and that's really the lifeblood of it. And I've worked to try and build some myself, but I realized quickly that like the constraint like is really on available speech data, and you go out trying to find it, and wow! But besides things like there's LibreSpeech out there and LibreVox where people read audiobooks for free. Besides that kind of stuff and a couple of traditional corpora that people use, it's really locked down. I found out like the lab I work at has access to some broad speech data, but the licensing prohibits you from doing anything with it that you could release. So,
Gotcha.
but I didn't do that. It's kind of a shame. I understand it's expensive to collect.
Right.
That's why I was excited actually when I learned about Mozilla's Common Voice project.
Oh, okay. Is that the deep speech thing?
It's related. They train deep speech models off it, but they make the MP3s available for everybody. And once you get beyond English, French, German, then it really drops off in like, the contributions. But those are the ones we need the most, right? So I always encourage people, if you speak one of those languages that's not English, French, or German, please go there and contribute your voice, because I go there and check and see if it gets above a threshold, then I can train a model and put it out there for everybody.
Nice.
So they're just like MP3 files of people speaking in those language, like speaking certain sample sentences in those languages?
Yeah, so you need the sample sentences and you need the transcriptions.
Yeah, and I think they're both done by the community to check and record.
Yeah, so the people verify, so they have I think you can only download verified ones. I don't know what that threshold is.
Yeah, that's really cool. I actually had no idea that you could just like, I don't know, like help, port support for other languages by just like you could just record your voice speaking a language essentially.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
So with like how Rhasspy's grown, I noticed the GitHub, when I first saw the GitHub page you had, it was around like 128 stars, and then like within like 2 months it got to like 600 something, and I was just like, whoa.
I hadn't noticed that for the longest time, and then I went in and was like, wow, okay. It was really, I think, 2 events that really did it. The guy who runs Home Assistant, he contacted me when he was getting ready to put out Ada and their voice stuff with with Stanford that they're working with, and I'm failing to remember the name. Anyway, so he contacted me and he said, it looks like you've done a lot of this stuff before. Maybe I could get your advice how we're building Ada. And so I worked a little bit with one of his programmers, and then when Ada came out, he kind of also promoted Rhasspy as an alternative too, and so that really gave me a bump. And then like maybe a couple weeks later, Snips shut down things, and so it was already riding high, and then they really pushed a bunch of people over, and that kind of sealed the decision that for the next big version of Rhasspy, I wanted to try to go for almost full Snips compatibility.
Right.
So that's what the next version is going to go for. It's mostly done. So Rhasspy's now fractured into a bunch of services that talk over MQTT, like with the Snips protocol.
Right.
So if all goes well, you should be able actually to take a Snips skill and drop it in and just run it.
That is super cool.
Nice.
That's the goal. But I never ran Snips, so I need to like pull some Snip skills and try them out.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's actually that basically like I have no better way to say this, but like Rhasspy is would be like the savior for Snips developers who have worked so hard on the skills,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're calling themselves Snips refugees.
Yeah, that's I can see why. But no, that would be super cool, especially because I mean, so many projects were developed with Snips. Like we're basically thinking of like releasing new guides with all of our we had so many Snips guides, like all of them redone with Rhasspy because Snips, you can't do that anymore. So
well, yeah, maybe I mean it's going to be a little bit before 2.5 I think gets tested, and we can kind of say it's working as well as 2.4. But yeah, I would wait to do any big guides until that, because there's going to be some UI changes and stuff. But mostly everything with your profile should stay the same. I've tried to make sure that doesn't break anybody's stuff.
Right, of course.
Yeah, but I can't support everything forever. But the code's out there, so if somebody wants to fork it and keep supporting some previous stuff, they can.
Yeah. I mean, we all know we somewhat know how difficult it is to get developers to contribute to projects that are open source. I mean, depending on for example, for Matrix stuff, it's so specific to our hardware that it's fairly rare for somebody to make a major PR. So it does happen sometimes though. So for Rhasspy, have you received a good response from developers trying to help you out, contributing, developing for it?
Yeah, I think I've had some surprising contributions. Some have been surface level. Oh, I fixed this in the documentation or whatnot. But there's been entirely new services delivered, like I mentioned, for the Google connections, and then other people have gone in and actually fixed things that I didn't have the time to figure out. There was a problem with the Mycroft precise wake listener, and somebody found out that there's actually a bug in it, not in Rhasspy, and they're able to upstream something to the precise developers,
right?
Which is great. So it's just making everything better. And then other people, they're just kind of fitting it to their scenario, their particular systems that they're using, and then they have been contributing that back.
Right.
There's one user who's really into something called GDM,
Oh
When,
yeah, the home is
and then
kind of also a home automation thing, right?
yeah. And so he's put out a Raspberry plugin, and he's got his own thing going with that, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
Nice. So I know you started Raspy for like kids to mess around with at first for like class.
Yeah.
But now that now that that's over, do you use it yourself?
Well, so I use it extensively at work. There's actually a funny story, but I had to stop using it at home, ironically. So my kids figured out how to activate it, and my son would start talking to it, and uh, as you know, like so Raspy, you put in your voice commands, right,
Hmm.
and it kind of goes out of its way to recognize something from that set.
Right.
And so if you give it gibberish, you'll occasionally have it, give you try to do something. And so the last thing I wanted was my son opening the garage door,
Oh.
or doing. He would just turn the lights on and off if he could all day with that. So we went to a touch screen for the time being until it gets a little bit older, and then we'll go back.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Hmm.
a little scary what you can control with voice.
Yeah.
Actually, do you have any plans? Is there any kind of like voice recognition you can add on to Raspy? I don't expect
As
that to
in
be,
like person-based recognition?
or
Like,
yeah, something like that
oh, I see.
to like prevent that kind of stuff.
Speaker recognition?
Sorry, can you
Do
repeat
you,
that?
do you mean speaker recognition, or?
Yeah, to like prevent that kind of stuff.
So there's nothing currently for Raspy.
Hmm.
Caldy actually has stuff for that with its, I think, X Vector support. I've looked into that actually for some stuff at work, but I haven't really gone too far into that.
Yeah.
I thought maybe just because my son's 4, maybe I could just do some kind of frequency-based threshold because his voice is higher than mine, right? But then my wife might get upset. I don't know.
That's funny. Yeah, no, that's the speaker recognition is actually interesting because I don't think there are many like open commercial like well not commercial but like open source like solutions for that because I think that's much tougher in terms of like I don't know like samples you need versus like the algorithms or like neural networks that will do that. I think it's like
Hmm.
much more complex to like know a person from their
Mhm.
voice. Yeah.
I think that there's a pretty standard pipeline for that in Caldy. I don't know of a pipeline for recognition in Sphinx. There is a tuning capability in Sphinx though, where you can tune it to your voice. Really, you tune it to an acoustic environment. They call it. It's your mic, your room, your voice.
Right.
Um, that's actually been supported in Raspberry if you knew what you were doing, but there's no UI for it.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so this is like I'm super excited for version 2.5. But in general, like I guess like what are features that developers could help you with? Like whoever is watching slash like whoever watches in the future could be like, oh, Raspy's super cool. I want to contribute. Like, what would you say as somebody directly working with it?
Mhm.
People could help out with, you know?
Yeah, as well as like if you have any, I don't know if you have any list of like a bounty,
Right. Like a
like
checklist.
yeah, like a
type.
checklist for people to see.
Um, I do actually. I'm putting in the docs. I need to go back and double check and review that. So testing up front is the big one. That's like one of the biggest helps.
Right.
I do like people connecting it out to different systems. I know some people are working on like OpenHAB
Hmm.
connections and
Yeah.
whatnot. I don't have time to run all these systems and try them out and all the configurations. So that's alone is a big help. And then bug fixes and pull requests are great. But
Right.
I think going down the road, uh, language support would be awesome. So as people can contribute free data for speech or
Right.
point me to new acoustic models,
Hmm.
I would really like that. One project I'd started working on and I've had to pause over time here is I was trying to go the opposite way and do text to speech voices for different languages using Mary TTS because it works pretty well, but there's not a breadth of language support there. I was trying to get a Dutch voice actually for the folks who were doing the Dutch-based speech recognition,
Yeah.
but it's actually kind of the inverse problem. Instead of for speech recognition, you want a bunch of different speakers, but for text to speech, you want one speaker who reads a lot of stuff, and you don't usually get those two things in the same place.
Right.
So people who are willing to donate their voice, like reading a bunch of random seeming text to get a good phonetic balance, that would be great. I do think though the one piece that is always a problem has been the wake word stuff. I've never been able to depend on a fully open source thing that was easy and worked well. Porcupine's been awesome, but it's not fully open source. So if they don't compile it for your platform, or they decide someday they don't want to release it anymore, it's going to be done.
Right.
Snowboy, same deal. And Snowboy, you have to create an account just to train your own word.
Got you.
Mycroft Precise would be the best, but it's really hard to train, and its performance isn't good until you train it a lot.
Right.
So you need a really beefy machine. So I wish if we could get something that has the performance of Porcupine but the openness of Mycroft Precise, that would be awesome. Then
I noticed in the docs Porcupine was the only one with the excellent rating for performance in your little table.
Yeah, I think Snowboy had previously set the bar really high, but then trying out Porcupine in a lot of different environments with noise and stuff. It's not 100% perfect, but it's about as good as I think you're going to get for free.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's why we put it on our guides for setting up Rhasspy. We directly went to Porcupine, because when we tried it out, I was like, whoa, this is basically as good as, if not a little bit better than what the Snips wake word was, in terms of how accurate and as well as how quick it was.
Yeah, and so really, I can't fault them. They have great stuff.
Yeah.
They want to charge money for and whatnot, and so they have that limit. If you create a wake word, it only lasts for 30 days before you have to retrain it, which for a lot of people is just a showstopper for that.
Yeah.
But they're at least nice enough to release, the couple wake words for free.
Right.
It would it'd be awesome if we could have a fully open source one that you could train a wake word and you could just use it forever.
Yeah. It would be interesting because I know a lot of people have been trying to get wake words or keyword recognition with TinyML and stuff like that. Like the TensorFlow Lite and all that stuff. Maybe if somebody comes up with because usually though at least the basic yes no keyword recognition doesn't necessarily always work well on the Raspberry Pi, so not super well. So if that gets refined, maybe something with TensorFlow, because that's all open source, all the TensorFlow stuff.
And there's some I know there's some mobile friendly TensorFlow stuff you can do. Deep speech, they recently redid their models to work on lower power devices, and so maybe there's hope for a TensorFlow based wake word thing that works as well.
Yeah, I definitely hope to see more open source components you can integrate into Rhasspy in the future.
Yeah, I think Caldy has been one of the kind of the giants there, and that one is incredible, and I'm very grateful for that project and to the creator Daniel. I can't remember. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Povey. For what he's done and what he's contributed, and I'm proud to be able to contribute something back and to be able to have his software as part of it. There's a lot more that can be done with it. There's a particular user who's been working with me, I actually read through some of Snip's publications and knows a little bit about how they were doing some stuff under the hood for their slot recognition.
Oh, you actually triggered our Snips assistant when you said that.
Let me Snips on the left.
No. Hey, Snips! On.
Ha, I don't know how that happened. That's funny.
Yeah, we have to replace we have a light switch here that one of our coworkers ripped out and put a Pi with a voice on it, and there's a relay attached to the actual wires, so it's just switching them on and off.
Wow.
So yeah, we plan to Raspify that.
Good, yeah. So anyway, Caldy has some facilities we could use for slot recognition, where you can put in gigantic spaces of possible numbers, for example, like Snips can do. If you do that in Raspberry right now, you're going to have a bad time. If you try to put in -1 billion to +1 billion number range, it's going to enumerate all of those values, and Snips had a way to get around that.
Yeah. Playing around with the skill creation for intents has been a lot of fun. Honestly, compared to what I've seen in other voice assistants, it's been a lot of like it's way easier. I mean, you do have to write the text, which is I guess the only slightly I guess intimidating part for some people, but like the rules are super simple for setting all that.
I'm really glad actually that there was a number of versions of the language before I came out with that, and at one point it dawned on me that this particular grammar language, JSGF, usually used to recognize stuff, could also be used to generate sentences. And so I kind of repurposed it and trimmed it down a bit, and I've kind of added things on. But I'm glad it's fairly easy to use, for text. But I think it's about as good as it's going to get for that kind of thing before you start getting more complicated programming like language stuff in there, right?
Right. All right. Well, I think. Do you have any other questions? We've gone through our pre-thought out questions. I think so. In the meantime, while we wrap up, like if anybody has questions, please ask in the live chat. While Mike is still here, and we'll start to wrap up the conversation unless you have anything specific in mind.
No, I mean so far most of the questions I had were answered about like what was coming for Rhasspy as well as like the origins of where that came from, because like from our point of view that came out of nowhere. Even though it was like being developed for like 2 years, just Snips is over, like, okay, I guess there's no voice assistant for our platform that's like offline anymore. I was like, what's this?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad I happened to be there at the right moment.
Yeah. It was the perfect timing.
Quietly working along with folks from the home assistant community, and then all of a sudden, here's this gigantic flood. I remember there was that, and then I woke up one morning and I checked Hacker News, and there was Rhasspy on Hacker News, and I was like, okay, this is people are actually liking this now.
So we have a question, and someone was just wanting you to ask again if you could reiterate. I guess like a quick summary of what are the main highlights of 2.5.
Well, he said, what is the 2.5 release date?
Oh, sorry. My bad.
Well, I don't have a firm release date. I'm hoping to get a preview release out this month.
Okay.
Before the end of the month. I keep getting sick, so I keep pushing it back.
Yeah, it's seasoned.
So, yeah, hopefully there'll be a preview release with the Docker image. So right now, Rhasspy is dockered up as like an all-in-one. You do Docker run on the main thing. So that I'm hoping to get that out before the end of the month so people can try it out. And then going forward, there will be that plus each of the services will have their own Docker images. So you can, for like a satellite, you could just Docker compose just the 3 things you need instead of pulling down this 1.5 gig image. You could just pull down maybe 300 megs worth of Docker stuff.
That is nice.
Which has been a big big complaint that folks wanting to do this on a really light Pi 0 or something. You got to pull down this gigantic thing, and then half of or 90% of it you don't even use, right?
Right.
So that I expect next month to get finished up, because most of it's done, like I said, and then there'll be a couple of weeks here to a month where we're going through testing.
Yeah. I did have a question actually that just popped into my head, because so you're obviously a very technically adept, I don't know if that was the right word, technically sound, knowledgeable person. Let's put it that way. So when it came to design elements for Rhasspy, how you wanted the UI to look, or how you wanted people to interact with it, how did you decide how you wanted the interface to be? Because it is very user friendly. I really like it. Carlos has had a good time with it. Was it an iterative process? Did you how did you
It
decide?
looked like you were using Vue.js. If I don't know if I'm wrong.
Yeah. So I was using Vue.js. For 2.5 I actually switched over to Alpine.js, which is a single JavaScript library that does a lot of the Vue-y stuff, but doesn't require Node and all of those things. Little bit easier to for me anyway to build stuff. It was a very iterative process with the folks in the Home Assistant community. So they basically built it one tab at a time, and folks would be like, "Hey, it'd be really cool if I could do this," and so I threw something up there, and then we went back and forth.
Gotcha.
So that was really it, and then it was just basically the limits of my ability to work with Bootstrap and Vue were the other two things that led to, well, I'm just gonna make this a big text box.
Yeah.
I wish I knew how to do like syntax highlighting in that text box, but that seems like a whole other thing. So if somebody wants to do that, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
For the sentences, that'd be great.
Yeah, that was one of the features I missed from Snips, where when you're writing the sentences, when you have like a slot name that you're selecting, it'll highlight the color, so you can like there's a better comparison between like the background and the foreground. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, okay, I know like how to separate it visually.
Yeah, that'd be great, something like that, and maybe with an autocomplete or whatever.
Right.
If someone wants to contribute that, I would totally take that in.
Yeah. So it seems mostly just like being receptive to feedback from the community has been like. And then that and for myself, I mean, like I said, I run it all the time at work, and I'm constantly iterating on it. So, true.
Like in 2.5, one of the big things, it's built up of all these services now, and sometimes one service fails to start, and so you saw the panel with all the icons on there, and some of them are green and some of them aren't. So I'm setting it up so you can tell when one of them died. So it's kind of, for me, feedback that I need to be able to use it and rapidly figure out whether something's wrong. So that's another thing that's contributed.
Yeah, that's super nice. I think, there's definitely value in being a user, like, of what you're building as well. That way you can also see, like, where the workflow would be more smooth, or, where something would be more user-friendly. But yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So looking, I think that was all the questions we had on the comments.
Yeah. Though, like, there are still 17 people watching, so thank you for watching, everyone. And I guess, do you have, like, anything else you'd like to share with, with our viewers? Like, words of advice, like, thoughts, anything?
I was going to say, like, for anybody out there if they're doing research on voice assistants, like, that are willing to share an open source, something I mentioned earlier was this, like, notion that Rhasspy, it listens to what you say, and then it's primed to do something with what you say, and that may not always be a good thing. And I don't know if you like watching Star Trek or something. One of the things that always got me was how sometimes they're talking to the computer and they say something and the computer says nothing. Right? It says nothing, and it fits. Like, it's like a person would not say anything there either, because they know I don't have to say anything back. But it feels like for the voice assistants, it always wants to do something back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested. That's kind of part of the human machine dialogue interest for me, is in deciding when is it okay not to say anything, or when should I change the topic, or something like that.
Right.
So if anybody wants to talk to me more about that, please email me or whatever.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like, human machine interaction, like, is such a, like, it's a very, like, broad term, so, like, sometimes it's hard to know, like, what it really means, but, like, in reality it's just, like, it's just depending on whatever you're using, like, making it feel more natural in a sense, I guess. Like,
one of the biggest issues I usually have is that when I want to launch a skill, and this is with, like, multiple voice assistants, where I'm saying something and then I realize, wait, I don't really want to run this command anymore, and I'm already the assistant's already saying, like, I'm going to run this regardless of whatever you're saying.
Oh yeah,
now.
like, I'm done listening to you.
Whereas a person, like, midstream, if you started saying, never mind, they would, no problem. They'd just be like, okay, I gotcha.
Right. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah, and I see places like, Amazon and Google getting into dialogue stuff, but their approach is just machine learning, and I feel like that's actually going to exacerbate the problem with being primed to do something, because they're going to train it on lots of data where people did something in response to the dialogues, right? And
right.
I don't know. So that's more of the cognitive science-y part of me coming out. Interested in that.
That's super cool, though. Yeah, all right. Well, I think that's all for today. We don't have any more questions, and from the live chat either. But, this has been super interesting. Thank you so much for, sharing, your whole story with us, and then also, like, your time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And
Thanks
thank
for
you
coming
for having
on.
me. Appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for making the tutorials on Rhasspy. I point people to those now as like a first stop. So I think that's great, and I hope you guys are able to keep using Rhasspy for other guides and stuff.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we have a lot more plans in the future to use this for any voice related activities. So like voice assistant, Raspy is the first choice for us right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Well, I'm hoping 2.5. Once I get that solid, you guys will be one of the first customers then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, for sure. Super
definitely.
excited. All right,
Okay.
thanks, Mike. We'll see you or speak again soon.
All right.
All
Thank you.
right, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's see. Whoops. Okay, so coming back to us. All right, wow. Well, that was super nice because like I had not like spoken to Mike before really. So getting to know a little bit about his story and then also how Rhasspy even materialized was pretty cool.
No, it was nice to know that it was rough around. Like at first it was not at all. It was part of an add-on at first instead of just being a standalone assistant, which was nice to know. Like it started evolving as it grew. And no, I think it's a really nice project, and
Yeah.
I'm excited for the newest updates coming out. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums up the whole live stream because no point in asking for more questions at this point.
Yeah, no, but we'll put the like links to Rhasspy itself, the documentation. We'll address that in a second. Documentation. We'll put links for
The community,
the Rhasspy
documentation, our
community.
guides, as well as our community.
Yep. So if you have any questions regarding Rhasspy for Mike, you can definitely post on the Rhasspy community. Definitely post on our community. Like we'll make sure all of them get answered / looked at. So yeah, and then also I Shot JR asked how you get a Matrix shirt. To be continued.
Yeah, all our branded shirts have just been us printing it really quickly for a convention or any kind of event we were going to.
We will see how to get something to others as well in the future, potentially. All right, caught me off guard there, but thank you all for joining. Super excited to have engagement on the live stream. I Shot JR, thank you for being here again. And yeah, I guess we'll close it out. Bye.
Bye.